Hello, my name is Jordan Stoltz. Today I will be discussing 5 different examples of how ordinary events in Salem residents were used against them to make them look guilty, and I'm going to explain why these events made them look guilty of conspiring with the devil. I am also going to be talking about 3 examples of how ordinary events in everyday life were used against the non-Syed in the podcast serial. I want to start off by talking about Salem first. During the time period that the Crucible was based off of, Salem was falling under witchcraft. People use this fact to solve their petty differences that they may have had with people they disliked, or to get rid of the annoying neighbor. The first example that I want to talk about is John Proctor and how he hasn't been going to church every Sunday. This can be seen as an ordinary thing given his circumstances. John is a farmer who lives 5 miles away from his church and has been having troubles with his crops that haven't produced as much as he would like. Also, let's be honest, some of us miss church from time to time, or at least know someone that does. This absence from the church, though, made John Proctor look guilty, and it did not help him later in the crucible. It was seen by the court that all these absences could have been because he was conspiring with the devil. The next example I want to give is when Guy Corey talks about his wife in the books. The first time that he mentions the books is in Act 1 when he's talking to Dr. Hale. He said, "Last night, mark this, I tried and tried, I could not say my prayers." And then she closes the books and walks out the house. And suddenly, mark this, I could pray again. Now this doesn't seem very strange. I mean, probably he just forgot his prayers or couldn't think of them at that time. He also said, and I quote, "It is my 3rd wife, sir. I never had no wife so taken to books." This was said when he was confronting the courts for condemning his wife. Now to us, these events don't mean very much. A housewife reading a book from time to time. But because of the time period and the circumstances, Giles, without knowing, called his wife out for being a witch and conspiring with the devil. The courts made it sound as though she were conjuring spirits and doing witchcraft in his own house. Therefore, this small matter condemned her to hang. The next thing I want to talk about is when Abigail was sitting next to Mary Warren in court. Mary Warren was making a puppet, otherwise known as a doll, during the procession, and when she was done, or to hold her spot, she stuck the pin in what would be the stomach part of the doll. This event shouldn't have meant anything, but Abigail saw Mary do this and took advantage of it. Now this is when the ordinary event turns into something not so normal. Abigail, knowing that Mary would probably bring the doll back to the Proctor's house, seized the opportunity and stabbed herself in the stomach. This brought some very unwelcome attention to John's wife, Elizabeth. This accusation later became the downfall of not only Elizabeth Proctor, but her husband John. Now let's switch topics and talk about Anand Syed. For those of you who don't know who he is, he was convicted of murder of Hayman Lee in February 1999. This conviction was later put in this podcast serial. The first thing I want to talk about is when Anand asked Hay for a ride after school. This seems reasonable. They were still friends and he was looking for a ride home. But because Hay ended up dead, it made Anand look guilty. It made him look as though Anand was trying to get close to Hay in order for him to strangle and commit the murder. The next thing I want to talk about is the cell phone calls. For anybody, it is normal to call and receive calls throughout the day. To anyone, this would be thought as normal. But because of the timing of some of the calls, on Anand's phone had matched up with Jay's so-called story, it made Anand look incredibly guilty. In fact, this was a big part of why Anand was convicted in the first place. The last thing I want to talk about is Anand's lack of memory. I don't think this is abnormal. I mean, who can actually remember over a decade ago what they did on, let's say, a random Monday? Personally, I have trouble remembering what I did 2 days ago, let alone remembering something so far back. So I find it hard to believe that someone could remember one specific detail from over 10 years ago. It just blows my mind that they could use this against him. To conclude this podcast, I believe drawing conclusions will lead to a disastrous ending. It could end up affecting someone in a horrible way. This is Jordan Stoltz, signing off.